State's Exhibit 164, could you tell us what we're looking at there?
That is a diagram of Robb Elementary, or at least that building within Robb Elementary, and the highlighted room is 108, which is directly across the hall from 102.
And that's where you continued following the path of bullet fragments, is that correct?
Correct.
And would you tell us what State's Exhibit 165 is?
That is a photograph of the entrance into classroom 108.
To orient us, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And 166?
That is going to be a photograph just stepping inside of room 108, turning to the right and just seeing that part of the classroom.
And which of those walls is adjacent to the hallway?
The wall on the right with the cabinets is
And
going to
is
be
there-
on the back side of that wall is the hallway.
And does one of your rods appear in that photograph?
May I approach, Your Honor?
Please.
You're going to see one of our flight path rods right here coming through this wall.
Thank you. And 167?
It's going to be a closer photograph of that flight path rod, the bullet defect in the wall, and the flight path rod coming straight through.
And am I correct that you can only affix that flight path rod if it is clear to you the path of the fragment? State's Exhibit 168?
It's just going to be another closer photograph of the flight path rod coming through the wall.
And State's Exhibit 169?
That is going to be a photograph of standing kind of close to the door of the classroom, looking back toward the windows on the opposite side. So to orientate the jury, it would be if the bullets had come in this window originally in room 102, gone through that wall, through the hallway, through that wall. It's going to be the windows on the complete opposite side of the building.
And where did you find, if you did, a defect in that photograph?
You can see it's kind of hard to see right here, but I do get another photograph later, but it's going to be where the bullet comes in and hits these blinds right here on that window.
And Exhibit 170?
It's going to be a closer up of the bullet defect. This is going to be one of those sticky adhesive markers that we use to identify it. That's going to be the bullet defect going into the blind.
And Exhibit 171?
Closer photograph of where the bullet struck the blind.
And 172, is that even closer?
Correct.
And along with that defect, were you able to find any bullet or bullet fragments?
Yes.
Showing you Exhibit 173?
Yes, the bullet is going to be down here as evidenced by this marker, number 15.
174?
That is the actual bullet that came through. It came to rest on the windowsill.
And is it a complete bullet or a fragment?
It's pretty deformed. It doesn't look like it has a jacket. It looks like part of the core of the bullet, like a lead core.
Okay, thank you. Now, was that the extent of the defects you found then in room 108?
Yes.
And what was the next room that you searched?
I can't remember the exact number. It's going to
Okay,
be.
well, let me just move to Exhibit 175.
Okay, yeah, so it's going to be room 104.
And when you move from 102 to 104, does that mean there were no defects in 103?
Correct.
Okay, and so you took pictures of the defects and went to the rooms where there were actual defects?
Correct.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 176, is this an outside view of that room?
Yes.
And do you see flags in that photograph?
Yes.
Would you point those out?
There's going to be flags in the grass right here.
Okay, and are they Were there defects in that window to the left of those flags?
Yes.
Showing you Exhibit 177. Can you tell us what that is?
That's going to be a closer up a photograph of that window. You can see where the glass is completely shattered in many of these places. You can see some of the, a couple of the trajectory rods placed in bullet defects coming from outside the window going to the inside.
And would you talk to us about the bottom pane of the window?
Well, there's not much glass there. It's completely shattered.
Okay. And do you know what caused that shattering?
If I'm not mistaken, this room, I believe, this was probably, it may have been bullet defects, but it could have also been attempts to escape the classroom, trying to break the window so students could get out of the classroom.
So so it's fair to say you can't tell us the origin of why that shattered. It's just when you see it, it's shattered. Is that
Correct.
fair? Okay. And your rods are also indicated there, indicating the path of the bullet through the window. Is that correct?
Correct. And this is the room also. You can see these gaps over here. This window frame was removed. We found it that way. It was removed. To take these photographs, we had to actually place that window back into the window frame.
So in a few minutes, we're going to see where the window's actually on the ground, but you had to place it in its proper spot. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you don't know why that happened, why the window frame was removed?
No.
And State's Exhibit 178?
It's a photograph of classroom 104, the entrance to it.
And Exhibit 179?
It's just going to be a photograph inside, looking inside room 104.
And do you recognize any of your yellow markers or yellow tints? I'm not sure what term you use.
Yes, these evidence markers here on the floor.
Okay. And is the window likewise in that photograph 179?
Yes, this is the window frame that we saw earlier. We had placed it up here to take these photographs, but this is how we had originally found it. The window frame had been removed and was placed there.
Showing you Exhibit 180. Can you tell us what that is?
This is going to be, it's going to be damage to the blinds covering that window. You can see quite a bit of damage to these blinds, whether it was bullet fragments or glass. Whenever bullets strike glass, a lot of times it pulverizes the glass. It turns it into shrapnel, for a lack of a better term, and it causes a lot of damage here. You can see all of these things here.
And State's Exhibit 181?
Again, just another photograph of that window. You can see the damage to these blinds and all the shattered glass.
Okay, and once again, you don't know the origin of that shattered glass, is that correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 182.
Going to be another photograph of this window. You can see the window down here, the window frame that had been removed from the original housing here, and it's just down here on the floor.
And did you photograph the damage to the window frame when it was in that position?
Yes.
Showing you Exhibit 183.
Okay, yes, this is a bullet defect that's in the window frame.
And 184.
Another bullet defect in the window frame.
And 185.
Closer view of the defect in the window frame.
And would you describe the defect in a little more detail? Tell us if it gave you an idea about where the bullet came from, the other side of the window frame or from this side of the window frame?
Correct. So in this one, we can tell that the directionality of the bullet traveling through this window frame, it was coming from outside to inside. So if you could kind of imagine that this is the side that's facing the classroom. So this would be the back side facing the exterior, facing the outside of the building. And you can see the directionality of the bullet coming in. You can see how it bent the metal as it comes through.
State's Exhibit 186.
This is going to be a picture of, this is one of our, another one of the Texas Rangers holding the window frame in place in that window housing.
And 187.
Just a closer photograph of the same thing.
And 188.
Another photograph of that window being held in place.
Okay. Just kind of a side note, 187, if we could go back one. Just in the background, there's a car parked there.
Here?
Yes. And then 188. Is the car gone?
Yes.
What explains the difference in that?
This was a long process doing all of these, so we photographed it at different intervals, different times. So I believe we were there working this particular side, this west side of this building, for 2 or 3 days. So at any given time during that 2 or 3 days, cars may have come and gone. We really weren't paying attention to those outside. We were just worried about trying to place this window frame back in its place and photographing and documenting first off how we found it, and then how the bullets would have entered this window.
Thank you. And Exhibit 189.
It's going to be a close-up of a bullet defect in the glass.
190.
This is going to be a photograph of one of the bullet defects in the window frame.
And also, does that tell you the origin, whether it's inside the room or outside the room?
As far as direction,
Yes, sir.
yes, it shows that the bullet did come from the outside and coming to the interior of the window. You can see the directionality. You can see how the metal again bent around the bullet, and it shows the direction of the bullet.
And Exhibit 191.
It's going to be a closer view of the bullet defect.
And the defect on the opposite side of that window frame, does it appear smaller than the defect on this side of the window frame?
It does.
And what's the explanation for that?
When a bullet passes through a surface, depending on lots of factors, depending on the surface it's passing through, depending on the bullet itself, typically a bullet sometimes will expand as it goes through a surface like this. So as it went through the exterior coming in, this bullet, whether it was the bullet itself actually expanding or some of the shrapnel and some of the other stuff breaking off of the bullet, some of the bullet fragments, caused a much larger hole on this opposite side.
So a bullet going through a soft object may maintain its integrity, but if it hits a hard object, it may expand and fragment.
It could. I think there are a lot of variables with both of those, with the composition of the bullet and the composition of the whatever it's passing through.
Fair enough. Exhibit 192.
Just going to be another, this is one of the trajectory rods coming through a bullet defect, showing it passing from the exterior to the interior.
And 193.
Another photograph, another bullet defect with a trajectory rod showing the direction of travel from the outside to the inside.
And is it slightly elevated also?
Yes.
And what does that say about the position of where the gun was in comparison to the window?
So this would indicate that the muzzle of the rifle, the weapon, where the bullet was fired from, would have been a little bit lower on the outside. It would have been a little bit lower in elevation as it fired, and the bullet passed through, coming in and going at an upward angle into the classroom.
And when we looked at exhibits 102, is that consistent then with fragments ending up in the ceiling?
I believe so, yes.
State's Exhibit 194.
This is going to be a photograph inside the classroom, standing back by the window, looking back at the door, the entrance door, and you can see some of our evidence markers up here with some of the trajectory rods inside some of the bullet defects. Around the door here, you can see some of our evidence markers indicating bullet defects on that wall.
So did you find that these defects were directly across from the window?
Yes.
And then we close in on those defects, is that correct?
Correct.
Showing you Exhibit 195.
Just a closer angle of these bullet defects on the ceiling and the wall.
And 196.
More of an overall photograph of standing back by the window again, showing the bullet defects on the ceiling and the wall by the entrance door.
And it may be light there, but do your rods appear there also?
Yes.
Showing you 197.
This will be a closer view of the bullet defects. You can actually see one of the pink rods right there.
And 198.
Closer view of the, these are the bullet defects that are, so here's the door. So the window would be back this way from the screen. So you can see the actual trajectory rods going in to some of these bullet defects in the ceiling tiles.
Exhibit 199.
Another photograph from a different angle of some of the bullet defects in the ceiling tiles.
And did you close in on those to show us why you believe they were bullet defects in 200, Exhibit
Yes.
200?
Yes. Another angle, another photograph showing bullet defects of various sizes, whether they were complete bullets or bullet fragments or actual shrapnel from glass from the window frame. It's hard to tell exactly, but you can tell some of the directionality of how they're moving.
And Exhibit 201.
Just a closer photograph of one of the bullet defects in the ceiling tiles.
Exhibit 202.
This is going to be a photograph of some more of the bullet defects in the ceiling tiles.
And 203.
This is a closer view of one of the bullet defects in the ceiling tile.
Okay. So there were a number of defects in the ceiling tile, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. 204.
This is going to be another photograph of a bullet defect in the ceiling tile. You can see another defect over here on this side.
And 206.
Another bullet defect in the ceiling tile.
And 207.
Another bullet defect in the ceiling tile.
Backing off from that then, in Exhibit 208, is this giving us a general view of the room? 204.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
This is 208. Thank you. Could you tell us what 208 is?
As far as the classroom?
Yes, sir, and do your yellow marker or tents appear there?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of those yellow markers or tents?
These are going to be showing either bullet fragments or some type of shrapnel, some type of object that came from whenever the bullets were fired into the windows.
Would you take a second just to show us the tents that you see in that photograph?
Yes. So there's number 12 right here. I think that's going to be number 5 right there. Can't really tell. But these are items that we found on the desks. Over here, there's going to be closer to the window, there's going to be more evidence markers indicating bullet fragments or some type of shrapnel that we thought was related to the bullets coming in through the windows or the window frames.
And Exhibit 209, does that show some of those markers better?
Yes.
And would you show us where those are?
Yes, these are the markers closer to the window that we just saw in the previous photograph. This one is actually going to be another bullet fragment closer to the entrance door of the classroom, marked number 4.
Exhibit 210,
It's going to be a closer angle of Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 3.
and Exhibit 211,
Going to be a closer photograph of Exhibit 3, which is a bullet fragment.
212,
Just a photograph of Exhibit 4, which is going to be another apparent bullet fragment.
and 213, is that a close-up of that?
Yes.
214,
Going to be evidence marker number 5 with an exhibit right there.
and is 215 a close-up of that?
Yes.
And what is,
So at the scene, it was kind of hard to differentiate right offhand whenever we were right there on the scene. So could this have been shrapnel from one of the mini blinds, or could it have been shrapnel from the window frame, or could it have been a bullet fragment? We weren't sure at that exact moment, so we went ahead, erred on the side of caution to mark it as just an item that obviously should not have been there, and it came as a result of the bullets passing through the windows or the window frame.
so whether it's bullet fragment or shades or the aluminum frame, it's a piece of metal that's flying through the air of room 104, is that correct?
Correct.
And 216,
It's going to be just another view of some of the evidence markers next, closer to the window.
and 217,
It's going to be evidence markers number 6 and number 7. And we're going to see a piece of either bullet fragment or shrapnel here.
and
And the same
218,
as
does that
here.
close up on number 6?
Yes.
And from looking at that, can you tell the origin of that?
In hindsight, it looks more like a piece of the mini blind, maybe a piece of shrapnel that came from the bullet defect, but at the time we didn't know if it was a piece of a metal jacket coming from one of the bullets or if it was a piece of the mini blind.
Thank you. 219,
It's just a closer photograph of it.
and 220,
It's going to be evidence markers number 7, number 8, and number 9.
and marker 8, is that next to a paper airplane?
That's what it looks like, yes.
Exhibit 221,
It's going to be another piece of evidence that we found, actually a couple of little pieces here, marked number 8.
and 222,
It's going to be evidence markers 8, 9, and 11, indicating some of the items that we found on the floor close to the window.
Exhibit 223,
It's going to be another piece of debris, whether it's shrapnel or a bullet fragment, closer to the window.
224,
This is going to be just a photograph of evidence markers 9, 10, and 11. We actually had to pull this bookcase out to see that, and obviously this is the window frame. The window would have been in this location over here.
and for a reference marker, the tent number 10, is that closest to the wall?
Yes.
So looking at 225, can you tell us which marker this belongs to?
That's going to be, I believe that's going to be number 10 right here. So this is the wall. It's on the floor here, and this is a piece of a It appears to be a piece of a copper jacket from a bullet. So it'd be a bullet fragment, but it would be the piece of the copper jacket that covers that lead core of the bullet.
And 226.
Just another photograph of 8, 9, 10, and 11.
227.
Going to be a piece of debris on the floor with our evidence marker there showing the size of it.
228.
It's going to be this is a photograph of the desk area. This is going to be the entrance door into the classroom. So to orient the jury, this photograph would have been taken closer from the window area, looking back toward the door, and evidence marker 5 and 12 on these desks.
229.
It's going to be a close-up of exhibit number 12.
And then 230.
It's going to be a piece of debris, either a jacket or a piece of mini blind, some type of shrapnel that was found on the desk.
And 231.
This is going to be a photograph looking close to the entrance door, or from the entrance door of the classroom, looking back toward the window, but they had these double doors that went into the classroom next door to it. So these doors are open. So this is going to be some of the evidence markers that are there, and some of the things that we found on the floor, on the desk, and some of those other evidence markers were over there that y'all saw earlier.
So those internal doors allow two different classrooms to access two different classrooms.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
You could come in one door and then go into the other classroom by this adjoining door.
Correct.
Exhibit 232.
It's going to be a close-up of, or a photograph of evidence marker number 13.
And 233.
It's going to be a closer up of some of the shrapnel or bullet fragment labeled number 13 that's on the floor.
Exhibit 234.
This is going to be the entrance door to that classroom. You can see bullet defects on the wall over here, and you can see one of our trajectory rods stuck in one of those bullet defects.
And exhibit 235.
That's going to be a bullet defect that hit the door frame. It did not go through the door frame, it just hit right there and made a defect, made basically like a dent in that metal door frame. You can see where it knocked the paint off, but there's a definite indentation from where the bullet hit it.
236.
That's going to be a closer angle or a closer view of that bullet defect.
And 237.
That's going to be kind of a zooming out photograph again of some of the bullet defects on the wall by the door.
238.
That's going to be a bullet defect on the right side of the door.
And 239.
That's going to be it appeared that it's going to be a piece of a copper jacket that surrounded the lead core of the bullet. It's embedded in the wall right here.
And 240.
This is going to be a couple of bullet defects that are on top of the door.
241.
Another view of those bullet defects with one of our trajectory rods in this one on the left.
And 242. We now move to the hallway.
Yes, this is going to be bullet defects that are outside the door. So to orient the jury again, if the windows are on the exterior of the building, going to the door that's on that wall, this is going to be in the hallway on the opposite side of that wall. You can see where one of the bullets came through, created a defect right here and right there.
And did you, well, let me just show you 243. Is that a close-up of that defect?
Yes.
And can you tell directionality from that defect?
Yes, it's coming from exterior, through the windows, through the classroom, through the wall on the opposite side into the hallway.
Exhibit 244?
This is going to be one of our trajectory rods going through that bullet defect, coming from the classroom into the hallway.
Showing a slightly upward angle once again.
Correct.
245.
This is going to be a trajectory rod coming from that bullet defect, and it caused that bullet defect on the ceiling. So this is the wall in the hallway, and this is the ceiling in the hallway. So that bullet came through the wall and made a bullet defect right there on the ceiling.
And does 246 show then the defect in the ceiling?
Yes.
And did that conclude then your investigation as to the room 204 and the defects that went through that room?
Yes.
So did you next move to room 105?
Yes.
Showing you State's Exhibit 247.
Okay, this is the diagram of the building again. Room 105 is highlighted in yellow here.
And was there any defect from outside to inside in room 105?
I believe there were.
You did. Let's go through that. 248. Could you tell us what that is?
Yes, so this is going to be a photograph from outside in the hallway of room 105, and we have a bullet defect right there.
And 249.
So this is going to be a view of room 105 from the area of the entrance door, and you can see some of our evidence markers here.
Okay. And is there a window there that is not in its complete form?
Yes.
And do you know how it was destroyed?
I wasn't there when it happened, so I don't know exactly.
Okay. And how many markers came out of room 105? Just these two?
Just these two.
Okay. Exhibit 250? I guess I'm closing up on the window there at that point.
Yes, that's going to be a view of it's going to be that window there, but our evidence markers are going to be right here on this TV stand.
And what is in front of that window?
That is a bookcase that's been turned over.
And if it were upright, could you access the window?
No.
And if it's knocked over, could you access the window?
Yes.
Exhibit 251.
That's going to be a photograph of the TV stand with our two exhibits, our markers.
Exhibit 252.
It's another photograph of the TV stand with our evidence markers.
And Exhibit 253.
It's going to be a closer view of evidence marker number 1. Here's the TV, and it's on the TV stand.
And Exhibit 252? No, 254, excuse me.
It's a closer view of a bullet fragment that was found on this TV stand.
And 255.
This is going to be a bullet defect that was directly above the TV stand. You can see our evidence, or the sticky adhesive marker on the ceiling tile right here, and that's the bullet defect.
And Exhibit 256.
There is the piece of shrapnel or bullet fragment that is embedded in the ceiling tile.
Exhibit 257.
That's going to be that's a view, a photograph view standing near the front door, near the entrance door of the classroom, looking back to the right at this wall. So this wall would be adjacent to the hallway. Just on the opposite side of this wall would be the hallway.
And on the opposite side of that hallway, would that be room 102, excuse me. I've lost the numbers, 1 second. 111, excuse me.
Yes.
And Exhibit 258.
This is going to be a bullet defect in the wall. Again, on the opposite side of this wall is going to be the hallway.
And Exhibit 259.
That's going to be a closer angle of the bullet defect in that wall.
And Exhibit 260.
This is going to be a view from the hallway looking into the classroom 105.
And 261.
That's going to be what appears to be a bullet defect from outside in the hallway, looking at the top left corner of that door going into 105.
And once again, across from that room would be 111, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So based on the glass being shattered in this room 105, as well as these defects in the walls, are you able to determine the origin of that one fragment in 105?
The one fragment, so the windows in this room were not shattered by bullets coming from the exterior to the interior. This one appears that the bullet came from the inside, from traveling into this room from the hallway, going into the room. So it was from the interior of the building.
And how are you able to exclude that it didn't come from the shattered window?
Because there were no bullet defects that we found in the window
Itself? Okay. Pass the witness.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ranger, we briefly shook hands yesterday, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, my name is Nico Hood. I represent Adrian, one of 3 lawyers who represent Adrian. You've done this before. You've testified, so I'm just going to jump right in.
Sure.
Okay. You're obviously qualified as a trajectory analyst, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you described to the jury yesterday what that is, but you're trying to determine pathway of a bullet, a trajectory analysis, from its origin to its endpoint, correct?
Correct.
And often they use your skill set with wound path analysis, right?
Yes.
Right, because it's the next step. If somebody unfortunately is struck by that trajectory, then the wound path should match the trajectory of the starting point and the end point where it rested.
Yes.
Okay. What training does an individual like yourself go through to do this type of analysis?
Well, as a Texas Ranger, we all have to go through a 3-week advanced crime scene school. We do lots of continuing education throughout our careers. One of the schools that I went to was a 10-week course of study at the University of Tennessee, the National Forensic Academy. That included shooting reconstruction, and those are the main, I guess, the main educational courses that I've been through.
Okay. And I think you said it on direct. I mean, this is not an exact science.
Are you talking about what, tracing the path of a bullet?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, bad question. Yes, sir, the tracing the path.
Bullets do weird things sometimes.
I
So,
know you
yes.
just said that yesterday. They do. And so they're educated guesses.
Yes.
And you said they can go in a million different directions. Once it hits something, bullets are just, they do things that are weird.
They can.
Often unexplainable.
Yes.
Okay. So now I want to direct your attention back to what you did there. And so you did this analysis. Is this the extent of what you did during your assignment or your duties of what you were given?
Are you talking about at Robb Elementary?
Yes, sir. At Robb, from the rooms that you looked for evidence, is that's all you did?
I did a few other things there, but that was my main assignment.
Did you have anybody assist you in this endeavor?
There were some other rangers that assisted, yes.
So you made the determination that the majority of the defects that you saw on the west side of the building came from outside.
Correct.
And you were mentioning things about the frame of the window and the indention of the entrance versus the exit. That's called beveling, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and will you explain to the jury what beveling is?
So beveling is, again, like, I guess, could we pull up that photograph of
Sure.
one of the window frames?
What do you remember what number that is? Any one of the window frames?
Yes. Any one of them showing that exterior defect and the interior defect.
They're right here. 183, for the record, Judge, it states Exhibit 183, 184, and 185. I think we have it here. That's 183, Ranger.
That will work. Your Honor, may I approach the screen?
Yes, sir.
So, in this one, if the bullet were to come from the exterior of the window, so from this side of the window coming out, this is an exit defect. So as it passes through this, surface, it makes the entrance defect and the exit defect. It bends the metal, like I talked about earlier. It doubles it out. So kind of makes it to where you can tell the direction. As the bullet passes through this surface, it bends the metal coming out.
And so, thank you, sir, you can have a seat. And so an entrance defect is smaller and cleaner, is that a fair statement?
Generally speaking.
Yes, sir, generally. And then an exit defect is usually larger and not as clean.
Correct.
I mean, irregular, I guess is the better word to use.
Yes.
Okay. And this is why you said, I think at the end of your testimony, that there were some defects in room, I thought it was room 105, that you believed were coming from the inside of the building.
Yes.
And when you use those trajectory rods, they're trying to trace back. So you're kind of start from the end point. You have to know where the entrance and the exit is, or the beginning and the ending. And you're trying to connect those lines together, and that's why that rod needs to be straight.
Correct.
You can also use a laser.
Yes.
When does someone like you decide when to use a laser or a rod?
I could have used a laser here. There were so many bullet defects. But you can use a laser at any time during this process.
And that's just more of a preference?
Yes.
Is one more reliable than the other one?
Well, lasers are obviously, they're going to be straight. Rods, you do have a little bit of play in them. Sometimes we have the plastic cones that you can put inside of a bullet defect that the trajectory rod will fit in, so it kind of centers it more in the bullet defect itself.
And on two different occasions, at least that I heard, you talked about the trajectory of the bullet going through a window, through a classroom, through a hallway, or into a ceiling. It kept traveling.
Correct.
Is that correct? And so when you see what appears to be the end of the trajectory, it could have kept going. You never know, right?
Unless, I'm sorry, if you...
What I'm saying is, if you saw a defect in the ceiling tile, you obviously don't know the bullet kept going. You didn't find the actual bullet.
Some of those, yes. There were some defects up above the ceiling tiles. Sometimes it was hard to determine exactly where they came to rest, but passing through those ceiling tiles, yeah, there was rafters up there and all kinds of things.
And just as a side note, the government's not going to contest us on this. The person responsible for these defects and causing this damage is dead, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's not Adrian sitting at the table with us.
No, to my knowledge, no, absolutely not.
And you're correct, by the way.
Yes.
And so, at some point in your investigation, or you're part of this investigation, you heard that from the inside of the school, there were some rounds that went outside one of the windows, on the back side, on the east side.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Room 111 and room 112 had, there was a bullet or bullets that went out of the building from 111.
I did not do any of the evidence gathering or evidence analysis in rooms 111 and 112.
But you understand there was defects outside of the building?
Are you talking about that came from 111 or 112?
Yes, sir.
Just maybe what I've heard through some of the other investigation, but I did not, I did very little in rooms 111, 112 past identification of the victims.
But you would agree that you are considered and you have testified as an expert in trajectory analysis in the past?
Yes.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
Yes, yes.
Ranger, I'm handing you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 2 for identification only.
Okay.
You recognize Defense 2, do you not?
I do not.
Okay. Would you, let me get a bigger, I stay one.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason. I'm also showing you, Ranger, State's Exhibit 1. Now, this is Robb Elementary.
Okay.
Do you recognize it? Okay.
Yes.
She has to type all this down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And this is the west side of Robb Elementary?
Yes.
And this would be considered the south side?
Yes.
And this is the east side?
Yes.
And then room 111 roughly, this is the state's
Mm-hmm.
exhibit, but is in here, room 111 and 112 on the east side?
Yes.
And these are what they call wings of the building. These are extra buildings on the campus?
Yes.
And you might not know, but they're lettered from A to E. This would be Echo E, correct?
I'll take your word for it. Yes.
Okay, yeah, well, they're lettered. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And so on Defense Exhibit 2, this is a close-up of what? Would you agree that's a close-up of a defect? Regardless of where it's at, that's a defect.
It appears to be, yes.
Okay. And did you do the analysis on Defense Exhibit 2, I'm sorry, Defense Exhibit 2 defect?
I did not.
Do you know if anybody did the analysis on Defense Exhibit 2 defect from Building E?
I don't know.
Are you aware that this is these are metal buildings, so defects, trajectories will affect metal different than other surfaces?
I'd say that's a fair statement.
And metal is metal's not a cover. I mean, it's more concealment. It's not going to protect you from a bullet.
Depends on what kind of metal. Are you talking about like the thin metal building?
The thin metal buildings, yes, sir.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Judge, this time we'd like to offer into evidence Defense Exhibit 2.
Any objection?
I don't believe he'd been able to identify it. He said he didn't work on that defect, he didn't see it. If they're offering it just to say it's a defect, I have no objection.
Well, yeah, they're going to want it in later, I'm sure, so we want it in.
I don't know, do you have an
There's no objection.
All right, it's admitted.
Can we publish it to the jury, Judge?
Yes.
Okay, so that defect right there, if that were to be on the top part, because that's where the electrical is, on the top part of Building E, then excuse me, you testified earlier that whenever there's a defect up higher, usually the source of that trajectory is lower, correct?
I think it depends on each circumstance. I mean, depending on what other evidence is present to indicate that the muzzle of that weapon would have been lower.
Sure. I mean, obviously, if somebody was in a building shooting down, that could be a possibility,
Yes.
right? But there are no buildings higher than this structure around Robb Elementary that you recall.
That I can recall now.
So if somebody is on the ground and the muzzle is lower and shooting up, then the defect would be higher on the building.
Generally speaking, yes.
Right. And you yourself, hopefully we'll get someone else to talk about this, but you yourself did not, that's not your evidence there, your
That's
evidence
correct.
marker.
No.
But a defect on a building like that, behind a structure that had a lot of gunfire, it would be very difficult to pinpoint where that came from. Was that a fair statement?
I think there's a lot of variables with that. It would kind of depend on if there's another corresponding defect on the opposite side of that wall, or even within that wall, if we could see where The bullet passed through this surface and made contact with another surface. If there is a corresponding defect, that gives us 2 points of reference to put a trajectory rod or a laser.
But correct, that is right, okay, but and you don't know if that was done on this defect?
I do not.
If somebody on the east side, may I approach, Judge?
Yes.
If somebody on the east side in front of this building, sorry, the west side. of
South?
This is south, I'm so sorry, Ranger, you're right, I'm wrong. So on the south side of the building, correct, made a claim that there were multiple shots fired at that individual. Is it fair to say that we should see defects like this multiple times in this area?
Okay, can you, I guess, repeat that? I want to make sure
Yep.
my logistics are correct.
That's okay. If somebody, as an expert, if somebody is claiming there are multiple shots on the west side of the building here, in front of this
So
structure,
this is the west side.
no, I'm getting myself confused. You're right. This is the west, on the south side of the building.
Okay, so if a suspect is, or if a person is here,
If a witness is on the south side of the building,
okay,
claiming that a suspect fired multiple rounds at them on the south side of the building,
okay,
we should see defects somewhere in one of these buildings, E, D, or even C.
if it struck one of those buildings, yes. I mean, obviously it could pass through as well, but if it struck one of those buildings, that would make sense. That would be logical.
But but also let's talk about the pass through, because you said something. If those rounds passed through, there would be defects passed in structures behind that, right?
Correct.
So in my initially confusing example, sorry about that. If somebody was on the south side of Robb Elementary and made a claim that a suspect shot multiple rounds at this individual, we should see defects here. And that you said initially, yes.
Possibly,
Possibly.
yes.
Unless they passed through, but then we should see defects here.
If it struck that, not necessarily, because again, bullets do weird things. Depending on the trajectory of it, if it's going higher and over the building, if it goes lower and into the ground, there may be a bullet in the ground. So in that general direction, if it's on a level plane, generally speaking, shooting from that direction to this direction, again, perfect conditions, level plane, yes, there may be some bullet defects on these buildings over here.
Yeah, and bullets don't just go forever, right?
Correct.
And that's the reason why on New Year, there's many warnings that people don't shoot a gun up in the air, because that bullet to get shot up, even though they don't intend this, has to come down somewhere.
Correct.
So bullets shot in directions, they have to go somewhere. They don't just disappear.
Correct.
Okay. And so that's all I was saying. If somebody is on the south side claiming a suspect shot multiple rounds this way, multiple, not one, multiple rounds, we should see some defects over here.
Possibly.
I want to direct your attention, because I think the government asked you a little bit about where some shells were laid. Hold on one second, Ranger, I'm sorry. Before I move on to the shells where they were laying, but seeing defects on structures behind the example that I gave you would corroborate this individual's, in our examples, claim that they were shot at multiple times on the south side of the building.
If that were a bullet defect that you showed me, yes, that would lend credence to that.
Not that one particularly. I'm just saying, if in my example before that, we talked about an individual making the claim that there were multiple shots at them. There should be, if there were defects in the structures behind that person, that would corroborate the person's claim that they were shot at multiple times.
If those defects were present, yes.
Yes, sir. Now, I want to direct your attention now to some pictures the government went over with you yesterday on the placement of some outside shells. And when I say shells, that's the casing, right?
Yes.
So when a gun is fired, if it's a semi-automatic, it has to extract the shell once the bullet is.
Correct.
If I have a revolver, that's not going to happen.
Correct.
And a revolver involves a double action where you pull and it winds it up, and then the hammer comes down and hits the primer, and the bullet will go out.
Correct.
But there's not going to be an extraction of a shell because it's going to stay in the cylinder.
That's correct.
And in the old days, the Rangers used to carry single sixes, right, where you have to pull it back every time and then shoot. It's a single action.
It's been a few years, but yes.
Well, yes, you don't look that old, trust me. But now a semi-automatic is where someone can pull the trigger repeatedly, and then it will continue to be fed in through the magazine. It's not a clip, it's a magazine, and the bullet will be sent out, and then the casing or the shell will be extracted.
Yes.
And every weapon has a different, well, depending on the manufacturer, a different extracting mechanism.
Yes.
Handguns extract their shells different than maybe a long rifle.
Yes.
And when I mean long rifle, what do we mean when we use the term long rifle?
A long rifle is usually just going to be a larger weapon. It's going to have a stock and a longer barrel on it.
Do we call a deer rifle a long rifle?
Yes.
But we also call an AR-15 or an AK-47 a long rifle as well.
Correct.
And so with a long rifle that's not a bolt action, which is a deer rifle is a bolt action, right?
Correct. Well, some of them are, yes.
Some of them are, right? Some are semi-automatic these days.
Yes.
But when I was hunting younger, it's bolt action where you shoot it and then you pull the bolt up, you enter another shell, another round in there, and then you can fire it.
Yes.
Okay. But an AR-15 is a semi-automatic.
Correct.
And so you can shoot that weapon as fast as you can move your finger.
Correct.
And so when you're doing that, casings are being extracted.
Correct.
May I stand up briefly, Judge?
Yes, sir.
And so there's a difference if one of these officers or yourself is tactically holding the rifle in your armpit, if you're coming into a room, versus, and I'm not making light of this at all, the only thing I can think of is like a Rambo where you're holding it low, shooting.
Okay.
Okay, so if I'm coming in this way, and if I'm in the same position, I'll come up here so the jury can see. If I'm in the same position and I'm shooting, I'm only going low because in my head I don't even like to pretend to point a weapon at somebody. So if I'm coming down and I'm shooting this way, it's going to extract the shells this way differently than if I was holding it perhaps Rambo style.
Generally speaking, on ejection of those cartridges
Yes, sir.
like that, I think there's a lot of variables that go into that, and I think there have been, my experience in training, there's been a lot of studies saying that, are they going to all be the same? No, they're not going to be
No.
the same.
Right, but what I'm saying is if I shoot from here and I do another round of firing from here, because of the distance of where I'm holding the weapon and the angle of where I'm holding the barrel or the muzzle, it's going to extract the casings perhaps in a different location.
Perhaps, but I think that'd be difficult for me to say
Okay.
accurately.
Well, I guess that's another point. It's just difficult for anyone to say accurately where shells are at. We have to look at the totality of the circumstances. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And that's a term of art in law enforcement. Is that a
Yes.
fair statement? What does the
Definitely.
totality of the circumstances mean? Will you explain that to the jury, please?
So totality of the circumstances means that you just have to take everything into consideration. There are going to be a ton of variables in any circumstance, and any of those variables could affect the outcome.
And what happens if we don't take everything into consideration when we're looking at a situation?
You could possibly miss evidence and get it wrong.
Yeah, and that's right. And so the goal is not to get it wrong. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay. And so now I want to direct your attention to State's Exhibit 112. May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
And so this is the west side of Robb Elementary,
Yes.
and then this is the south side of Robb Elementary.
Correct.
Okay. And then we can see there's these AC units here, correct?
Yes.
And so if someone is behind the AC units and somebody was shooting from behind this fort, those AC units would be, depending how strong they are, either cover or concealment for sure.
It could be, yes.
Will you explain to the jury what the difference is between cover and concealment?
So cover and concealment, it's a term that we use whenever we're talking about basically trying to get out of the way of a bullet. If I had a sheetrock wall between me and someone who's shooting at me, that would be more cover, or I'm sorry, that would be more concealment rather than cover. Cover is if it's going to be, if it were a brick wall, like a cinder block wall, something that a bullet couldn't pass through, that's good cover. A sheetrock wall, that's going to be concealment. I'm hidden, but that bullet can still go through that surface.
So the concealment is you're concealed, so it's harder for me to aim at you. Cover means you're protected.
Correct.
And so if somebody was shooting here, and give me some hypotheticals,
Okay.
then that person, if there was someone behind these AC units, I would have to stand out. If that shooter would have to stand out over here into the grass to get a different angle and line of sight.
I think that's fair. Yes.
We explained to the jury what line of sight means.
Line of sight just basically means what you can see.
Right. And and that's one of so you don't ever shoot at something you can't see if you're trying to safely shoot, correct?
Correct.
And so if there was someone behind these AC units, I would have to move out to the right of them, go further south to get line of sight on somebody on the other side.
That's accurate.
And if I was shooting, now hypothetical, if I was shooting at someone on the other side of those AC units, and I was discharging a semi-automatic, we would see these casings further south. Is that a fair statement?
Not necessarily. Again, there's going to be variables on where the person was standing, how the weapon was held.
Well, that's what I was asking you earlier, right?
Sure.
Okay. So let me make real specific. If I'm trying to shoot someone on the other side of these AC units, we've talked about that. I would need a better line of sight, so I would, in our hypothetical, would move south. Correct?
Correct.
In our hypothetical, if I moved south to shoot, what evidence, if you were trying to prove that I shot at that person, what evidence would you look for of me shooting at that person behind the AC units?
I mean, of course, cartridges, the ejected cartridges are going to tell the general area where someone is.
One step at a time. That's
Okay.
right. So that's my point. If I was further south, you would see ejected cartridges even more south.
Possibly, yes.
Quite possible. I mean, the wind can't, just so they understand, if I'm shooting a semi-automatic and the casings are coming out, even if it was windy, the wind is not going to blow the casings over to my left.
I've been in some crazy wind, but it would have to be a...
Then you're from West Texas,
It
right?
would have to be a crazy wind.
Right. It'd have to be crazy wind, right?
Yes.
Okay. Crazy wind. Okay. So if I'm shooting over here, then we should see some cartridges to the right of me.
Possibly, yes.
Possibly. That's an answer, because you have to answer that way, right?
Yes.
Okay. You're not being difficult.
I'm not trying to.
And I know you're not. And so if these casings are here, then most possibly the shooter was over here to the left, more west.
I'd say that is possible.
Probably more possible.
It's
More
possible.
likely than not. Is that fair? More likely
I would
than
say
not.
it's more likely that they're over there than rather than over there.
Correct. And in your knowledge, there were no casings found further down south.
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, I want to direct your attention really quickly before I pass you to gunfire echo. You're familiar with gunfire echo, correct?
Yes.
We explained to the jury what gunfire echo is?
Are you talking about in reference to how it comes off of
Yes, sir, exactly.
buildings?
Yes, sir.
Depending on how many buildings are around or your particular surroundings, it's just an echo. It's just like if you yell, there's going to be an echo. If there's gunfire, there's going to be an echo for that as well.
And may I approach, Judge?
Yes, sir.
And we can see around Robb Elementary, there are buildings, including Robb Elementary, that could have had this gunfire echo. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So if somebody is shooting on the west side of Robb Elementary, which we know happened, that most likely, possibly, would create gunfire echoes.
It could.
And do you know now in your investigation that there were 3 officers over here on the corner of Grove and Geraldine?
I'm not familiar with that.
If there were, in a hypothetical as an expert, and they claimed they were being shot at, we should see some evidence of them being shot at. Was that a fair statement?
Possibly if the bullets struck something.
Right. So if they're being shot at, there should be possible evidence of things being struck.
Possibly, yes.
But even if they weren't being shot at, it's reasonable. They could have thought they were being shot at because of the echo.
I guess that's a possibility.
Possible. If somebody is on the south side of the building, in our earlier example, and let's say we don't see evidence that they were being shot at multiple times, it's possible they thought they were being shot at if somebody was shooting on the west side of the building.
That's possible.
Thank you very much, Ranger. Oh, hold on, I'm not going to pass you yet. Hold on. But in general, echo can distort location of a shooter.
It can.
Thank you, sir. Pass the witness, Judge.
112, I think is the last thing we talked about. From this exhibit, you were talking about line of fire. You recall that testimony?
The
Or
line of sight?
sight.
Yes.
Okay. From the foreground or the bottom of this photograph, Exhibit 112, do you see the two white police cars?
Yes.
And would you point those out? Here's your marker still here.
Your Honor, can I approach the screen?
Yes, sir.
There's going to be one right here, going to be one right here.
And is there a building behind that first
Yes.
vehicle that you pointed to?
Building right here behind this patrol car.
Is that in a line of sight?
Yes.
And to the right of that, been described as a playground.
Over
Is-
here,
Yes. Is that in the line of sight?
from this area?
Yes.
Yes.
So if you're holding a gun could be shot down that line of sight into the playground, into that building, or in the direction of where those two white police cars were.
Yes.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
And in your investigation, you can stay right there, yes, sir. In your investigation, you had not heard of, or you did not see yourself or collect any evidence of gunfire at the playground or at the pavilion?
Correct, I did not.
So there are no defects in the playground, there's no defects in the pavilion, correct?
That I don't know. I did not examine those. I didn't collect any evidence over there, but I didn't go over there to look.
But you've not even heard of any evidence being collected over there?
I have not.
Thank you, Ranger. Pass the witness, Judge.
Mr. Turner, what else?
No further questions, Judge.
Okay, see, subject to recall, either side?
Not by us.
No, Judge.
Okay, Ranger, you are excused. The rule has been invoked, so please don't discuss the case until you're aware it's over.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much.